If we think about these civilization building organisms, then,
Yes.
so there's some argument that, and we're kind of going on to like alien stuff here, but
Cool.
that a civilization
sort of
building,
try to generalize a bit more, maybe.
that a civilization building organism would always potentially have features that are similar to humans. And that's based on, I suppose, the only example of a civilization building organism that we have is a human.
Yeah.
And that body plan is particularly effective at building civilizations in comparison to any other body plan that we know of.
Yeah.
Well, it's the only one that's capable of it.
So it might, exactly. It might be the case that like you need front-facing eyes. You need to be bipedal. You need to have opposable thumbs. Like that's like opposable thumbs or some way of manipulating tools is like surely absolutely essential.
Yeah. You could be like squid tentacles that do it or something, maybe.
Yeah, true. But I mean,
like
that's still some way of manipulating tools.
Some way of manipulating tools. Absolutely, yeah.
But even as far as like, I mean, loads of sci-fi portrays aliens as humanoid, mostly because it's
the costumes are cheap. Yeah.
But maybe there is some like rationale for that. Maybe there is some basis to expect that surface dwelling, so like terrestrial, as in land-based animals,
maybe
that evolve high level intelligence will likely be roughly humanoid. I don't know, I don't know.
I'm not buying it necessarily. No. There is that kind of idea, and there's also the idea that it would always be like oxygen breathing because you get like the most energy from doing that.
Yeah,
that's not a mad idea.
That's not a mad idea, and that's much more general than what I was just saying about humanoid.
Yes,
and in fact, that's actually quite likely. I mean, that's by far the most like energetically favourable type of metabolism that we know about.
Yeah, and that's not. And you can say like potentially
and we need a lot of energy to run like our massive brains.
Yeah. And potentially there are other chemical reactions that can give you energy, but in terms of the ones that are utilised by life and the stuff we see here on Earth, where the chemistry would be, the chemistry is different in terms of different planets, but the fundamental chemistry is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And those oxygenated reactions seem to be like a very, very favourable way. I think they're released by far the most like free energy into
they do. The
organism can get, and so to have an intelligent organism, you're probably going to have an extremely high energy releasing metabolism, and respiration system and stuff. So it's actually not at all a crazy idea to think that
there would be oxygen breathing.
Even every civilization in the whole universe is an oxygen breathing civilization. That's not necessarily a mad idea.
It's not necessarily a mad idea.
It's not.
I mean, you might
potentially not true at all.
It's potentially not true, and you could find a scenario on a planet where, I don't know, that it's been very stable for a very, very long time, and there haven't been like catastrophes and things like perturbing, and you've got say it's like an icy moon and there's no sunlight getting into the biosphere part of it, like Europa, and you've just got life that's the primary production, so the energy acquisition of life is driven by
like volcanic
like chemical reactions basically, instead of
they breathe sulfate.
And there's no oxygen.
Yeah.
That you can have like really slow intelligence. So like brains that are as complex as ours, but work on a much, 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 much slower rate, possibly. It would be very hard to interact with such an organism, because its energy requirement would have to be. I mean, its energy requirements would be the same as ours, but like stretched over a much, much, much longer time scale. So it'd be just everything would be super slow. Okay. That makes sense, sure. And there's obviously like loads of different potential body plans that aren't human, that could still, even if we consider the oxygen scenario to be true, you can still have like a ton of different like weird, like I don't know, things with tentacles, like any body plan almost that is able to use tools and probably communicate. Yeah, some like weird insectoid things, loads of like little pincers and stuff.
Yeah, or just something we can't even imagine.
Yeah, sure.
Or something like Solaris.
Well, yeah, like, I mean, that's the other thing. Is like on the crazy other end of the spectrum is types of intelligences that are just totally different to what we imagine. We're thinking here about like vaguely human recognizable types of intelligence, but maybe you could have like a biosphere that's like some kind of weird meta-organism, I don't know, but crazy shit like that.
Yes, and you wouldn't recognize it as intelligent because you wouldn't even understand that it was alive necessarily. possibly true. But on Earth-like planets, it would not be entirely surprising. I mean, it would be like, oh my god, what the hell? But it would be kind of it would
in like a rational, like scientific way. I mean, I would be like going mental if we found any kind of life anywhere.
Yes,
but
but it wouldn't be actually a hypothesis that it would look in some way similar to some type of life that's lived on Earth before.
Yeah.
It's not that wild a hypothesis.
Yeah.
It's a valid hypothesis that could potentially be somewhat true.
Yeah, and maybe actually, just thinking back to what I was just saying about this icy moon scenario, that possibly that even that was a load of rubbish.
Yeah,
in the sense that like that you there is a minimum energy requirement.
Yeah.
So it is
you have to have
impossible.
like speed, like in terms of the electrical connections and stuff, and neurons and things. They have to be fast. They have to, in order for you to maintain like a conscious state that's worth something.
Yeah. We don't know this, but it's totally plausible to make that argument.
Yeah. Oh, it might be in a similar way that like an ant colony is kind of like a distributed intelligence.
Yeah.
But it never can do quite what a human civilization. Or maybe it could. I mean, there's some arguments that ants might replace us.
Yeah.
If we died out. But at the moment, anyway, that body plan, you can't necessarily. Well, I don't know. They do sort of build civilizations.
They do.
But anyway, maybe
if you think of a colony of ants as an organism rather than the individual ant.
That's
itself,
what I mean. That's what I mean. It's like a distributed intelligence.
Yeah.
But you still can't have that. Potentially, you can't have that kind of like you can't have scholarly ants necessarily, like sort of because their intelligence is in the individual intelligence is not compartmentalized into like one's fast, rapidly communicating section like a brain is in higher mammals.
Yeah. Unless there was some way of like colonies of ants, like a whole colony of ants recording some kind of information for another descendant colony of ants to read and understand and then translate into like
what I'm saying technology. Is they can potentially, because they're a distributed intelligence.
Yeah.
They can never have that like as rapid.
Yeah, sure.
As in, they just can't think through things fast enough to kind of react to them in like normal time periods that make them evolutionary useful traits to pass on. Yeah. I mean, who knows? It's just a wild speculation.
That's perfectly reasonable, though. I think. Yeah. So I think at the end of that, it seems like there's a totally reasonable. It's totally reasonable to expect that what we see here, like very, very roughly, like oxygen breathing, animalistic in some kind of way, like intelligence would be something that we'd find. If it exists elsewhere, it's a good reason to believe that it might look a bit like this.
Potentially. Yeah, obviously, who knows?
Yeah. Which might mean that we could breathe the air on another planet that is.
Yeah, that's what, if you came into contact with civilization, it might be much easier to share resources and stuff than you might imagine. Although, if you've got similar biologies, then potentially you've got like bad consequences with like diseases and stuff.
Sketchy alien diseases.
Yeah, I don't know which I'd place my bet on really, but I could see both scenarios really. I could definitely see oxygen breathing organisms as like a higher civilization building animal, and like you said, some sort of tools to manipulate the environment and things like appendages or whatever. But that may look, when you first see that though, that may look like outwardly like just, whoa, that's nothing like us. We've got
what
this
the
totally
hell is that thing?
Yeah. But actually, like biochemically, it's not that different. But then, like, I mean, who knows if DNA evolves in the same way? You get like totally different. Like, you know, whether DNA is always the kind of baseline of what we call life. Maybe it's not. I mean, maybe you have different codons and all this kind of stuff, different base codes, everything.
This is why we need another biosphere so we can make these comparisons.
Exactly. If we find another biosphere,
so interesting.
That's why it's so important. Potentially, if we find a biosphere on Mars, to work out if that biosphere is has a second origin or second genesis, if you like, to the Earth. Because if it has had that second genesis, as in it
like a totally separate origin of life,
yet the life on it has still evolved using DNA, etc., as its like information carrying molecule, then potentially that gives us more evidence to say actually maybe that's what life looks like in the universe. That is how the thermodynamics mean that you end up with something that is DNA based, and otherwise whatever it is that evolves isn't life. It's some sort of just like geochemistry or whatever.
There's only one way of doing it, and that's this way.
Yes.
But so that's why we need that. Yeah, we need that other biosphere to make these make these comparisons.
Yeah, so fingers crossed for some of the missions in the future.
Yeah.
Who knows?